On today's show, Thomas Glasgow, founder of 1122 Marketing and a leading expert in Google local service ads for law firms. We'll cover how lawyers can achieve peak LSA performance with a clear, step-by-step strategy that includes training Google's AI to send more qualified leads, improving your intake, how to correctly rate leads, and ultimately generate more signed cases.
How do we show Google that your law firm provides the best searcher experience? And so our entire system of running LSAs is designed to influence and show Google that the experience you provide to Google's client or customer, the searcher, is better than anyone else, because that's what they care about when they determine where they rank people on the LSA.
Welcome to the Alpha Lawyer Podcast, a show dedicated to exploring what makes law firms thrive. I'm your host, Jason Marsh. Join me as I interview some of the smartest thought leaders and accomplished law firm owners in our space. Together, we'll dive deep into law firm operations, marketing, technology, finance, and everything else you need to build an incredible firm that allows you to live your best life. Hello, and welcome back to the Alpha Lawyer Podcast. I'm Jason Marsh, but today I'm here with Thomas Glasgow. And for anyone that's ever felt the frustration of Google local service ads, like I certainly have, I think you're going to like this one. We're going to be talking about how to make these LSAs work. Thomas recently wrote this great article in ABA's Law Practice Today called How to Train Google LSA AI to Get More Qualified Leads. I'll share that link in the show notes. But before we get into that, Thomas, I want to give you a proper intro here. You're the founder of 1122 Marketing. It's an agency that specializes exclusively in managing Google local service ads for law firms. And so great to see you, Thomas. Thanks so much for coming on today.
Yeah, thanks, man.
So, all right. So Google local service ads, right? They started rolling out like to lawyers specifically 4 or 5 years ago. And I feel like in those early days, it just felt like kind of shooting fish in a barrel. The leads were good. They were cheap. You could dispute literally almost anything and get a credit. But then sort of like a lot of things these days, you know, with any sort of, as people adopt the product, the price starts going up, the results don't necessarily follow suit. You can't even dispute ads anymore. And, the system's changed a bit. And so I know a lot of firms are struggling, with these local service ads. And so I'm excited to talk to you because, a few months ago, we had a private conversation about your approach. And I feel like I walked away from that conversation thinking, like, man, this guy really knows a lot about LSAs and speaks about them because I feel like I've heard a lot of people talk, oh, do this, do that. And it's all kind of the same thing that people are saying. And what you had to say was a little bit different. So I'm excited to dig into the details with you. So anyway, as alluded to earlier, right? LSAs not really performing like they did a few years ago. What have you been seeing? What kind of trends?
Yeah, well, I mean, almost without fail, every lawyer that I talk to tells the same story of, yeah, when we first got on, we were crushing. We were signing motor vehicle accidents at $300 a case, 200, just like unbelievable. The same cost that it gets that you would pay just to get a lead, people were signing cases at, right? Like, we have seen a 5 to 10x increase in cost in just 5 years on LSA. So it was almost too good to be true when it when it started, and quickly has gotten more expensive as more people came onto the platform. And Google also, I'm sure, was offering discounted pricing to get people hooked on the product, and they have. And so, but yeah, I hear the same thing. Is like, it was great. We've kind of hit a lull. Some people have given up. Just like this, we can't find success there. And I think a lot of the advice that's out there that you had spoken about it's not bad. It's not wrong, right? Like, the ways to optimize the profile, you need to answer the phone fast. Like, you need a lot of photos, or like the basic things Google will tell you whether you call or look at their documentation. Like, this isn't incorrect. I just think it's incomplete.
Yeah, it's basic.
It's basic. And so, what I try to do is think about what Google wants with local service ads, and then reverse engineer the system to give them what they want, right? And so, to me, local service ads are trying to solve, or trying to Google is using them to prepare for what is now happening, which are two things really. All of the monopoly issues that they're running into, although they actually had a favorable ruling come out yesterday
I saw that, yeah.
on some of that in regards to selling off Chrome, which is kind of unbelievable. But I still stand by this claim that I think these monopoly things will continue to be problematic for them, as well as increase in use of LLMs and alternative search platforms, right? Google is, because of these two issues, they will lose market share, right? And they already are losing market share when it comes to search. And so they need a product, a paid ad product that people really like using and delivers great results, right? With PPC, it's like the experience isn't the first thing they're concerned about. What they're worried about is making money. Whereas with LSAs, searcher experience is paramount, right? And we can see this as true where, like, if you set a budget of $1 million on an LSA campaign, you might spend $0, and likely listeners have done something like this, right?
That's a great point. I want to get into that, but that
Yeah.
specific problem a bit later.
Well, I think what it signals is Google doesn't care about making a profit above searcher experience when it comes to LSAs, right? They want to do both. They want to make money and they want to provide a great searcher experience. But with LSAs, like we see with that ridiculously large budget, if you're not doing other things, they won't spend your budget. Whereas with the PPC campaign, if you set that same budget for the same exact job types or practice area, without a doubt, you would spend that $1 million that week,
every
right?
dollar. They'll find a way, to serve you up on anything.
Yeah. And so the question that we try to answer with our agency's response to how to run LSAs is, how do we show Google that your law firm provides the best searcher experience? And so our entire system of running LSAs is designed to influence and show Google that the experience you provide to Google's client or customer, the searcher, is better than anyone else, because that's what they care about when they determine where they rank people on the LSA.
So given that, right, and it's interesting that you say that, drawing the distinction, especially between the traditional Google ads, right, that basically been, I would say, 90% of their revenue for decades now, and have enjoyed a lot of market dominance in search that's sort of eroding. But in terms of like the user experience, obviously that's super key with LSAs. So what do you recommend in terms of trying to enhance that, particularly as Google's able to see it?
Well, so there's the things you'll see commonly discussed, like answer that phone lightning quick, right? Very important. That's not wrong. You need to answer that thing super fast. You need to get good reviews into your Google business profile, right? This is first-party data that Google is able to pull from people who have had an experience with your business. It signals to them that you are continuing to provide a good experience for people in the market. So like these are obvious, they're more widely discussed, and they're all true and should be done. But I think to build on top of it, what happens during the phone call when someone calls your business from an LSA, I think the greatest lever any business has to pull to influence how Google understands the searcher experience that people are having when they talk with you. And so coupled with how you then complete the feedback survey that they provide, the rate this lead button that is on there, are ways for you to directly show Google, both by what's happening on a call that they're listening to and recording, and by the direct feedback that you provide them, on showing them that you provide this great searcher experience, and then allowing you the opportunity to further train the AI on what you want and don't want. And so
I just wanted to say, this is the thing that when we spoke, I'm like, this is the thing that I've not heard anyone talking about, like the importance of what is getting said on that phone call in terms of the transcript the AI is looking at to understand, as you say, the user experience. Is it a match between what the caller's looking for and what the law firm service offerings are? And so, this is the thing I really wanted to drill into, because, right, AI is everywhere. Google's using AI in all sorts of different ways, but particularly when it comes to the calls themselves and how it can affect ranking. So can we talk a little bit about what you think should be happening on that call to properly train the system?
Yeah. So let me give you an example that I frequently give. Let's say personal injury law firm, like every other personal injury law firm, motor vehicle accidents are probably your number one thing you're chasing after, right?
Yeah.
So let's say someone, let's just make up a market, Dallas, Texas, searches personal injury lawyer near me. a particular law firm pops up. They call that law firm. The law firm answers really fast, and the intake specialist quickly determines that it is a property damage only call, right? Property damage only. Normally, that law firm's just going to turn that lead down immediately, right? They're going to say, we can't help you, whatever. So what happens if you do something like that is this. This is what Google sees. They see someone searched for a query you wanted to rank for. They displayed you at the top. Someone called you, and then you said, we can't help you, right? For a keyword auto accident lawyer near me that you want to compete for. And so the problem with doing something like this is now we've created this negative association between a keyword we want and what you told the caller. And so from Google's perspective, that's a bad searcher experience because now this person needs to go call someone else. So there's a couple things happening here. Like one, maybe designing a way to leave that more ambiguous so that the system doesn't necessarily think they made a terrible match, because in general, you're going to want to appear for that query, right? So a way to conclude that call where the system isn't able to ID that you turned it down right off the bat, right? And then ways that you can then complete the feedback survey so that it can influence the AI how you want. So a lot of the work that we do with LSAs is designing protocols around how people respond and speak with clients on, or potential clients on the phone, so that we can protect the AI from hearing things we don't want it to hear, and to make sure that it can hear things we do want it to hear.
Yes. So, I mean, that's really fascinating, right? And so I think what you described is a great example, right? For an injury firm, particularly looking for MBAs, you're going to get people that are searching for car accident lawyer in whatever area. But as any injury firm knows, some of those people are going to be at fault for the accident. Some of them are not going to have injuries, just going to be property damage. But they still were looking for a property or a car accident lawyer. And so there's alignment there, just because it doesn't have all the fit in terms of what you would want to acquire that case. What if somebody calls up, you're an auto accident lawyer in whatever city, say somebody's calling from another state, or say somebody is asking for a criminal defense matter or something, and none of these things, you're not advertising in that area. What do you do then?
So the protocol we use is, I always say, if it looks, smells, or tastes like a personal injury case, I want to leave it ambiguous enough on the call so that on the back end, when we go to complete the feedback loops, the way that we complete the feedback loop can be cohesive with what happened on the call. So that's the first guiding principle, is we never want to have dissonance between what happens during the call and what is said on that feedback loop, right? Those two things always need to be able to jive, or at least have enough ambiguity so that they make sense with each other, right? If you're a personal injury attorney and you get a phone call for a weapons charge or a drug charge or something that just like wouldn't ever make sense for a PI and likely didn't match a search query that you want, I think that's fine to reject that right there, because you don't want those type of leads. So we want to train the AI for what we want, right? And so if you truly don't want those leads, I think rejecting it and then completing the lead survey and saying very dissatisfied, it's not a job type that we handle, is the right way to do that. Where I think you need to be careful is where it's like an MVA, like we described, where maybe it's just soft tissue and you don't want it because it's not catastrophic enough. But if you were to mark it really negatively, you might be sending the wrong signal to the system, telling it we never want to see anything like this, right? So there's a lot of nuance to how you decide how to complete that survey. But I think the important thing is to make sure too that you can leave enough ambiguity on the call so that depending on how you want to rate it, those two pieces are cohesive.
So would it be fair to say, like, let's just again use the injury attorney, somebody's calling about an auto accident, they're at fault, or there's not really a case to be had there for an injury attorney. Is it a good thing to do? Think about what that person probably searched for, and if it likely is aligned with what you're offering, but if all the details don't match up to actually have a case you want to acquire, to still mark that as a good lead, because I think that's an area like Google's not really going to have based on a keyword search. And this has been the history of even traditional Google ads. I mean, I always felt 25% of the calls you're going to get are going to line up, no liability issues, there's actually an injury and so on. The rest are going to be people looking for an attorney like you, but they're just not going to have all those details. Is that fair to approach it in that
It's
way?
for sure trying to understand the intent there. Yeah, if you think that the keyword that generated the call is a keyword you want to rank for, then following this protocol that we're talking about makes all the sense in the world. Yeah.
And then what about, and this is one thing I've seen, say you're a firm and you have a call service. Maybe you have someone that does intake during normal business hours, but overflow rolls to a call service, certainly all the after hours, weekends, etc. That these people typically are not super well trained on this type of thing that you're talking about. Oftentimes they're literally just trying to like get the information and essentially say, I'm going to have someone call you back. Now
Yeah.
I could imagine, based on what you're describing, if say you're an injury firm, you're getting a criminal defense case, an intake person's probably not going to just flag that as, no, we don't do that. They'll just take the information. And I think that then would give Google a signal. You stayed on the phone for 5 minutes, collecting information, getting all this
Yeah.
stuff. Oh, that's totally what they're looking for. And then all of a sudden you go in the system and you're like, very dissatisfied with this lead. It's like you're saying, it doesn't align with the signals that are going into the system.
Yeah, it's dissonant. You're saying two different things about what happened on the call and then the survey that you complete. So like Google's using AI to analyze that call and they are creating their own opinion about what's going on there, and then they ask us to give us direct feedback about what's going on. And so we want to be able to have the system have a clear understanding of what's happening. And yeah, in order to do that, those two pieces, the call and the feedback, always need to be aligned. And so using outside answering services can be tricky with the level of nuance that there is to this. Like, I mean, our team, not to be too pluggy, but like one of the things that I think is really important with LSAs is to have someone who can listen to the call, look at the call notes in your CRM or lead management system, and then make a determination as to how to complete that feedback survey, right? Like there's a lot of, and you can use tools to analyze the call for you to take out some of this manual work, right? But there is still a human component where you got to look at the AI analysis or listen to the call, look at the notes in a CRM, and then decide how to rate that lead. And so if you are just blindly rating leads based on the status that you see that lead having in your CRM or something like that, you are likely not providing the best feedback you can provide to Google, which is going to negatively impact your campaign.
Gotcha. Well, okay, cool. Well, I want to get into sort of intake and how to handle all of that specifically. But before we do that, I just want to, and the other thing I want to get into is sort of a practical walkthrough of, okay, you get a lead, what you'd market is how, like sort of how to go through each step. I think that would be super helpful. But back to intake. Let's talk about that. We know just in general, right? A good intake is a real difference maker just in signing up more cases and giving that caller a good experience. But just to talk about it in terms of sort of how it's sending that signal back to Google's AI and how you manage that. I know you all at your firm have spent a lot of time working on intake and training firms on how to do this. What can you share in terms of that, giving a caller a great experience and giving Google what it's looking for specifically on that call?
Yeah, so I mean, we'll install, like I said, like that, a set of protocols that of things we always want to happen on an LSA call and things we don't. And so just to kind of move forward with it in a bit of a linear fashion, like the first thing you need to do is be able to understand when an LSA is actually calling your business, right? And a lot of people, what we'll find is like we'll have a call rail number or a call tracking metrics number set up where there's a whisper message to alert the intake team. The problem is Google is already running your number through their own tracking number. So we already have like a couple layers of call forwarding with different tracking numbers happening. What frequently happens is that whisper message never even makes it to your intake team. So they're flying blind, not even realizing that it's an LSA call. So one of the first things to do is to look at that and see if that's happening to you. It likely is. And if so, what you need to do is you need to create, using whatever your phone service is, like your soft phone or VoIP system or whatever, create a separate phone number in there that then forwards to your intake team And you can name that number or that DID Google LSA or something, so that when your team's device rings, it displays Google LSA. That's the only way to really know before your team answers the call that it's an LSA, because those whisper messages get cut off frequently. So that's the first thing, is like
That's a great
being
tip.
aware. And so, yeah, you can do that. Like, I mean, a lot of people are like on Ring Central or something, right? Like if you go in, if you create a new number or a new queue, as they call it in Ring Central, and then just name that queue Google LSA, and then have it follow all your normal settings. You can just clone them over, right? Like but having that unique queue is important. And you can still have your call rail number installed. Just forward your call rail number to that new DID.
Right.
So now there's like 3 layers of forwarding, but each one has a purpose, right? So I do think that's the right way to set it up from a call flow standpoint.
And all of that happens like instantly, all those, 3.
Oh, the flow. Yeah. There's no real delay in the call getting anywhere. It's just the front end work of setting up all those things and testing and making sure that it's all built properly on the law firm side. But yeah, once it's set up, the potential client isn't going to be aware of anything. They're going to call and it'll call fine. Yeah. So then once you do that, yeah, there's like we talked about, leaving some ambiguity, not turning it down necessarily on that initial call where the AI is listening. Like, you want to have these set of protocols installed. You want to answer that phone lightning quick, like everyone talks about. That is very important. And then from a intake standpoint, I mean, this is where the battle is won and lost, right? Like, can you close these things? Can you ID them as good cases and get them to sign up right then and there on the phone? Like, intake is everything. And so it's really important to understand what your cost per wanted lead is from LSAs, what your cost per signed case is, and then what your conversion rate of wanted leads is. Because this really helps you understand where the problem lies, right? Like, is the problem with the quality on the LSA campaign, or is the problem, this is true of any marketing channel, right? But like, where's the issue? Is it a marketing issue, being a lead quality issue that marketing is generating, or is it a conversion issue? And so these are all things that I think all marketers, because they sometimes feel like intake things, right? But I think all marketers should be very concerned with these traditionally kind of viewed as intake KPIs. I think these should be front and center on every marketer's radar as well, because ultimately that dictates how a marketing campaign performs, right? Like, I think that's what's important. I have a performance marketing mind, though. Like, I'm a really bad brand guy. I'm not good at any of that. So to me, it's like, how much did that thing cost? How much did it cost to sign? Are we signing it? Yes or no? Like, it's very binary for me, which I know is not necessarily the opinion shared by everybody, but that's just how I think about it.
Yeah, but that's how it should be, particularly with a direct response channel, digital one, that you can literally track every detail of it. How much did you spend? How much did you earn? What's the delta and the ROI between those? And that's it, right? Because it's not really a branding channel. You can do a lot of other things to just get your name and your face and firm out there if that's what you want to do. But in terms of the call, a couple questions, right? So we identified like a couple layers. One, you get a call that's completely unrelated to what you do, and then you get a call that is related, but ultimately it's not a case you want. And then, of course, the call you get that's the case you're looking for. Like, when you get one that's completely not what you want, is it important on the call to explicitly state, hear the person out and say, no, I'm sorry, we don't provide that service. We just literally, so that ends up in the transcript that the AI can read. Conversely, if it is a case, oh, wonderful, these are exactly the type of cases we handle. Tell me more, etc. Is it important to get that in the transcript, or is that
matter
that much?
So like, let's use like, if it's a personal injury attorney who gets a call for a family law case, I think being explicit that you don't want that case is important. If it's a personal injury attorney who gets a call for a case like we talked about where it's maybe soft tissue but that they don't want to sign, I wouldn't be direct on that call saying we don't want this, right? That's where I would leave some ambiguity to it, because that lets you complete that feedback survey how you want.
Got it. Yeah, I feel like for a while I would tell people, like, not even for the reasons you're describing. I was just like, you know what? Like, Google's going to charge you for currently, like, if anybody even mentions like car accident or anything that you're advertising for, just mark it as like a great lead, right? Yeah. Otherwise, you're going to be sending all these bad signals back to Google. And I know it's like painful because, you're getting charged hundreds of dollars sometimes for property damage only call, but you kind of have to bite the bullet with that, knowing that they did look for what you provided and you want more of that. It's just a roll of the dice on sort of if everything that happened in that caller's experience is suitable to actually acquire the case.
Yeah, I mean, I tell everyone, because we did the same thing when disputing was still allowed. It was, we didn't dispute, and I told everyone, like, this is a cost of doing business on the LSA platform. We are running the campaign with our clients' target cost of acquisition in mind. So you should always like know what you want to pay for a case, have that be your ultimate guiding light, right? And if you are within that target, then I'm of the opinion as to not to try to over optimize it by saving a couple $100 on a couple leads you don't want to pay for. And if you're too price sensitive for that not to be something that you can stomach, I don't know if LSA is the right platform for you to be running on, because I just don't think you can really be successful on it without that kind of approach.
Yeah, you make a good point, because when you're looking at it on a lead by lead, you do have to have a strong stomach sometimes, because you look at what it's costing, you're going, this is complete junk. Like,
Yeah.
but if you just go back to stepping out, let's look at this on a monthly or quarterly or annual basis. How much are we spending? What did we get? And if that falls
Yep.
within the framework of what you're trying to accomplish, you're good. But man, you
Yeah.
do have to stomach some bad leads that, sometimes I'm like, man, Google is screwing some people over here. And so anyway, are there any?
Oh, they're definitely screwing people over. I mean, they want to make money. Don't mistake the searcher experience as being paramount as them saying they don't want to turn a profit. They want to turn a profit and charge you for sure.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. So, but in terms, like, before we sort of get away from the intake, are there any sort of big mistakes that you see people making on intake that you just want to say, just whatever you do, just don't do this?
I mean, I think not answering the phone, you'd be surprised at how many, like accounts you'll see that just have a bad response rate. So I think not answering the phone would be like the lowest hanging thing that's available. But also monitoring your responsiveness score. So you can do this, and this is a really important thing to monitor that I don't think people are checking as carefully as they should on LSA. So Google is using this to determine in part where your ad ranks. The only way to get the data like presented cleanly is to tap into the LSA API, and you can extract it there. But you can kind of reverse engineer it by doing this. So if you have your account in an MCC, if you look at it from the MCC view, if you're not looking at it from the MCC view, you're not going to be able to see this. But if you're looking at it from the MCC view at the overview of all the different CIDs in that MCC, they're going to have a calls column and a connected calls column. And if you simply just take calls divided by connected calls, or connected calls divided by calls, you'll have the percentage of calls that are connected, and that is the percent that Google is determining, or that Google is viewing as your responsiveness rate. If that is less than 90%, you have a problem, and it's going to be really negatively impacting your LSA ad rank. So that's a really important metric to watch. And then, so the way to influence that, if it's poor, well, a couple things. One, Google's operating, they say, on a 90-day trailing score, like every 90, like they're clearing the data out every 90 days. The API only passes 60 days worth of data in, so it's unclear if they're actually operating on a 60 or 90-day score, because they'll only let you pull the previous 60 days worth of data out. So somewhere between that 60 and 90 days is where everything continuously resets. So if you're looking to influence that responsiveness score, you can just wait 2 to 3 months and let it clear out. Or you can insert more data into the system, and you can do this in a myriad of ways by turning on direct business search, turning on all leads, opening up additional job types. Now that's a whole other can of worms. You're going to get a lot of unqualified leads and spend a lot of money on stuff you don't want. But if your only problem on the LSA is that responsiveness score, that can be a really quick way to improve it, so that you don't need to wait those months for the score to reset.
Wow, that's awesome right there. That's some really cool advice. I feel like I'm going to need to listen back to this and like just take some notes on this conversation. All right, let's do a practical like sort of walkthrough on this. You get the lead notification, you head to the dashboard to review it, and I feel like there's always questions coming up, again, based on the quality of the lead. Let's talk about if these. Obviously, if the leads are great, you mark it as booked, you put the name in, you put it in the notes.
Yeah.
Rate the lead is awesome, all of that. In terms of like, if the leads are not that good, specifically, say you get a lead that's literally not in your practice area, not what you're advertising for. So do you even mark it as booked, or do you just leave that blank? What do you do then?
Everything is booked. And then where you provide the feedback on the quality of the lead to influence the system is on the survey part. But everything for me gets marked as booked, and a name gets plugged in and a little bit of additional information. I don't see any real correlation between a really robust note section and not having one, which is odd because you would think that would be a lever you can pull to provide more data. We run accounts where that happens and they perform great, and then we run accounts where they're putting in really great notes and it doesn't seem to have any bearing on improving account performance. So I haven't seen that played out, although it makes sense that it would, but I just haven't seen it ever reflected in actuality.
Well, that's great. Good to know, because that's always something I've wondered about. Like, how detailed we need to be here when it comes to putting in the note. Should we put this lead sucks and this is
Yeah.
why, or just basically, it sounds like really the notes are almost just for you to know what went on, that they're not really weighting what you put in there heavily. And maybe that's because people could manipulate it pretty easily if they did.
Google says they're for internal use, and I generally don't trust what they say about things, particularly when there's a spot for you to provide direct data to them. But based on how I've seen that note section perform, it really does seem like it's just a spot for businesses to add their own notes to it, and it doesn't really impact the performance. The spot to add your notes is when you hit the rate this lead button, and if you select the other option, it'll let you add a note there. That's the spot to provide notes to help influence how you want.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so let's walk through that. So, you get the email, you get to the dashboard, you're going to mark it as booked no matter what happens. Drop in the customer name if you have it. Notes, just talked about that. So then now you're waiting to see whether or not the lead gets charged. Once the lead does get charged, it's going to offer you the opportunity to rate this lead, right?
Yeah.
Anywhere from very satisfied to very dissatisfied. And so, and do you ever find yourself in the middle there? Maybe you talked about some of the ambiguity ones where you book this car accident lawyer, but they're at fault, probably search for you correctly. Is that one of the ones where maybe you go, okay, I'm going to mark that as booked, send that signal. Now, when I get into the charged lead and rate the lead, maybe do you just still mark as very satisfied? Or
Yeah, this is where the nuance comes in, right? So the first thing is, what happened on the call? How was the call left? If they say, we can't help you, you would be ill-advised on the call. It would be a bad decision to mark that survey saying it converted, right? Because now we've created dissonance. So it's important. That's why I like to leave the ambiguity on the call, so that when you go to complete the lead survey, you have options, right? So if you left it ambiguous and on the call side of things, and let's say it was an MVA where it was soft tissue, little bit of treatment, but you didn't end up signing, that I would mark as very satisfied it converted, right? Because that's going to meet your criteria in terms of someone at fault in your state with injuries, or someone not at fault in your state with injuries, right? Like, you want those type of leads. This particular one, you didn't, but you want Google to send you those. So even if you didn't sign that, I would tell the system, we're very satisfied. Give us more of these, please, right? You would be sending the wrong signal there. Now, let's say someone calls and they have another MVA, but it's property damage only. You're also not signing this one, but the property damage only is explicitly discussed. They say there are no injuries. This is very clear on the call. This one I would not rate positively. I would say we're dissatisfied, right? And then I would tell them why in the other section. This is property damage only. We only handle things with injuries. And this is a recent change in strategy for us, going back to about the spring, with rating things more negatively. Prior to their update that they had, I'm trying to remember, it was sometime in the spring, Jason, we would have just rated everything much more positively. They've created a lot more connections across LSAs and the rest of the Google ecosystem, and I think they have more information about searcher intent and what else might be going on with individuals for them to better understand prior to them even typing in the query what they might be dealing with. Whereas before, it seemed like all they really knew was what they typed in for that initial search query, and so you could manipulate the system a little more easily. Now, I think they have a better sense of if that was truly just a property damage only case before they even called. And,
Right.
and to try to gamify it, we don't see that working anymore. So for things you truly don't want that are like property damage only, we would still leave it ambiguous on the call because I still think that's beneficial. But then on the survey section, rate it negatively. For things where there's injuries but you still don't want them, I would rate those positively.
Yeah, it's great to know that because there's clearly a lot of nuance here in terms of like what someone may have searched for,
Yeah.
specifically what they're looking for on the call, and then how you respond to it. And I just wanted to highlight because you said something important there, right? We talked about the notes kind of in that initial lead screen, not that important in terms of what you put in there. It's really just for you. But once the lead's charged and you hit the rate this lead, right, and you say you're dissatisfied, that's when you get an area to put another note, and that you're saying is what Google actually will look at to
Yeah.
determine what fit there is for you. So this is important because that seems like you got to make sure you're putting the details in there.
Yeah.
And how detailed should you be there?
Yeah, well, so yeah, that's a good question. So there's two levels of feedback. So you can provide the very satisfied to very dissatisfied, and then depending on what you select, it will give you a sub reason of why you were very satisfied or dissatisfied. And some of them will just be you select that option, but then there's always that last option where you can say other and then provide some notes. And I like to, I mean, you don't need to write a paragraph, but being very clear about why you're dissatisfied with it, I think is useful because that the system is reading and taking as feedback, right? So for a property damage only case, we say something to the extent of this person was not injured. We only can help people who are injured or who have died or something to that extent. This was a property damage only case. We do not handle property damage only cases. Like I'd spend a couple sentences telling them exactly what you do handle and what you don't handle.
Yeah, that's great. And it sounds like, okay, so that's really important in terms of lead quality going forward. And assuming you mark that as very dissatisfied, you put that note in there, you don't handle that. How does it actually affect, because sometimes, I mean, I see things get credited, obvious crazy stuff that isn't remote does not get I'm like, how does
Yeah.
this thing doesn't even seem to work? It just seems rather random. Like, what's your take on that and how
Yeah,
that
your
works?
goal on feedback should not be to get a credit. It
Right.
should be to train the AI. In my experience, you might get up to 2 credits back a month for negatively rating a lead. So, like, they will give you a couple, but after that, you will just get a response that says, thanks for providing your feedback. So, do not use the lead survey as a way to try to get money back. You will get 1 or 2 leads credited, and then after that, you were just going to be providing very likely the wrong signals in an attempt to save some money, which is going to be really problematic for the longevity and the health of your campaign.
Yeah, so it kind of goes back to what you were saying before. You just got to realize you're going to eat some garbage in this, and you just can't get hung up on it. It's really all about just training the AI and the system to get you the leads you
Yeah.
want to start with. So, all right, well, let's talk about sort of performance, right? And sort of when, and I think a lot of people fall into these sort of issues where it's just simply not working. And that's either going to be one of two things, right? Either you're just not getting any leads. Like you said, you could set your budget at $1 million. You're not getting leads, or you're getting plenty of lead flow, but they all suck. I mean,
Yeah.
I feel like I've seen both of those things. And like, what do you do about that? Can you reverse any of that poor in either of those areas?
Yeah, well, it's going to take a couple months too, because remember, you're operating on that 60 to 90 day ish data set that Google's pulling from. So the first thing to remember is like, because you go in on day one or the first day of we're going to rate these leads, we're going to do everything right. Like you're likely not going to see an overnight result, right? Like it's not quite as it's slower than like a traditional lead gen program where you like turn on and start getting leads day one, and it's much faster than SEO. It's kind of like this in between timeline, right? It's going to take a couple months, but yeah, then you should but the levers you have to influence that quality are the feedback that you provide, what you do on the call. I mean, those are the controlling levers that we see are most impactful when it comes to influencing lead quality. So throughout or over time, doing those things properly will help influence the lead quality. Now, there's a couple of things that we see more often than you would think on campaigns that are also just providing bad lead quality, and these are they just have job types turned on that they don't really want. So maybe they're personal injury and they have premises and med mal turned on and they don't want either of those, and those are less competitive. So Google's going to send you the less competitive ones if you tell them you want them before they send you anything else. So like the first thing would be look at your settings and your profile and budget and make sure you actually are targeting the things that you want. Low hanging fruit, but we see it for sure. And then, do you have all leads turned on, and do you have direct business search turned on? So all leads means you'll appear for literally any lawyer query that someone types in. So if you're personal injury and someone types in lawyer near me, you will rank for that. And you'll get calls for everything, right?
So it sounds like you're saying make sure that is not turned on.
The only reason to turn that on would be if you truly want calls for everything. You're a practice that handles everything, or you refer a ton of, like, there might be an instance. We don't run it for a single client, so I can't really think of a common one. The only time to turn it on for a short term would be if something catastrophic happened to your responsiveness score and you're a high volume firm and you need to quickly solve that problem with a lot of lead volume. Maybe you're doing 5, 6, 7, 800 leads a month on LSAs, and over the weekend something on your phone flow or your call flow broke and you missed 50 calls. If you need to fix that responsiveness score, turning on all leads can let you do that quickly because you can drive in another 50 calls that day. Now, you're going to pay Google for all of those calls, and they're not going to be things you want, but it will help outweigh the negative of all those missed calls. So there's a place for it from a fixing issues standpoint, but from a generating quality lead standpoint, I see all leads to be pretty useless.
And then, okay, so that's a good hack in terms of sort of fixing that and how you might utilize that. In terms, the other one you mentioned around like your brand.
Yeah.
I've heard different people talking about this. It does seem insane to me that you're going to spend hundreds of dollars for someone that's literally searching for you, when I think you could do better with just make sure you're advertising for your own brand in regular Google ads where you can pay a few dollars for that click. What's your take on that? And maybe there's some use cases around like when to and when to not use it.
I'm not always opposed to it, and here's why. It's multifaceted. One, if you want to be ranking number one for your own brand, the only way to guarantee you can do that is by running direct business search on LSAs, because it's going to rank in the number one spot. If you're running PPC for your brand and a large competitor in market wants to bid on your brand name, they're likely going to outbid you, right? You're not going to be willing to spend $700 on a PPC branded campaign for your own brand, but the big law firm down the street might be willing to do that. And so the only way to protect your brand name with certainty is to run direct business search on LSA. So if that's important to you, then that's a reason to do it. I think it's really important, if you're going to run this strategy, to make sure that your cost of acquisition, to have a baseline for what your cost of acquisition is on an LSA before you...
It's going to increase it, right? Because you're getting calls...
Or it's going to go down because your like if you're really niche in your market and all the calls you get are for this one thing, and like they're now all calling your LSA, your cost of acquisition might go down because your lead quality might be increasing, right? So
great.
So it can go either way. So you need to know what it is before, and then you need to see what it is for the LSAs, but then also see what your average or your blended cost of acquisition is for all channels to let you get a sense of how it's impacting you holistically, right? So it could be positive or it could be negative. So I don't just always write it off as this is a bad idea. I think you need to be able to look at the data before, during, and after, and then isolate your blended costs and your LSA costs to have a sense of if it's helping or hurting.
Thomas, this is the most nuanced answer to that I've ever heard. And by a lot. I swear, I've heard other people talk about this and they just frame it as bad. Don't do it. It's a way Google's, stealing your money. But now I can see there's a strategy around it. And particularly two things, right? One, sometimes LSAs appear way above the regular Google ads. So you, even if you're advertising there and you're winning there, it may they may not see it. And then the other thing is if you're a firm that's spending a lot of money building awareness in your market, whether it's, billboards or Facebook ads or whatever, you're probably going to have a lot more branded search queries. And you do want to make sure you're appearing at the top and winning that and making sure you're surfacing number one. So I can see that. And then at the end of the day, you're just going to do the math on everything and make sure it all shakes out.
Yeah, I mean, my thought is like for the big brands, right, who are doing a lot of branding, and you want to capitalize on it, is it not worth the extra couple $100 when someone searches for your brand to make sure that they actually see you there and call you. Like, you've done all this work in the market to establish your brand, and then when they run the brand query to have 4 competitors outrank you because their SEO is better or they wanted to pay more to buy your brand, like, would you, if you're spending millions and millions a year on TV and billboards, would you not want to spend the couple hundred extra to make sure it comes home, that lead comes home to you? That really, nothing works in a silo anymore, right? Like, we're working with everything, and even though LSAs are lead gen performance kind of based marketing, like, they still are impacted by your other marketing efforts. And so I think that's a way that they can work in tandem, but you got to know the numbers, right? So I would never just say it's good or bad. It depends. If you want to run that strategy, know the pros and cons and have the data to make an informed decision on it.
Yeah, of course. That makes so much sense. So yeah, so basically if you have good brand awareness, you're investing in that, it probably makes sense to continue that in LSA. If you don't, then that might be not the most cost effective way to spend those dollars.
One more real quick point on that, Jason, that I think is important. Google is running your listeners, and your accounts probably don't have this yet because I've only seen it on like 2 accounts, but they're running a test where you can isolate how much it costs to get a branded lead versus a non-branded lead right now, and you can see that in your dashboard on your reporting. And we have a couple clients that are part of this beta right now, and what we see is it's actually about 50% of the cost to get a branded query. So if you're normally paying $250 for, you just see that as your cost per lead on the platform, you're likely only paying about $125 for those branded ones. So I do think that's a check in a reason to run branded is they appear, even though you don't see them broken out that way, Google on the back end is actually charging you less for those branded queries, which is interesting.
That shocks me that Google would even do that, but that's still great to know because that does seem like the fair and reasonable thing to do, which, as we said, I think we both share a healthy skepticism of Google and sort of how they operate.
Well, what I think they're setting us up for is LSAs are going to continue to take the place of Google business profiles, and they're going to continue to try to monetize what would have been GBP traffic with LSA traffic. And so they want to be able to charge you for it, but not make it so unpalatable that you just don't run it, period, right? So I think they're trying to find that sweet spot of how much can we charge someone for a lead that they used to get for free, right? You were paying a lot for SEO, but for free in terms of Google being able to monetize it. And so, yeah, I think that's why you see the discounted thing. And this is true too with like the badge. I don't know if you saw this news. They're essentially getting rid of any sort of ID badge on LSAs or screen. They're getting rid of their Google guarantee for lawyers, never had it, but for other service areas. And I think this is all in an effort to make it seem even more native and to be able to continue charging people for what they want it to look more like a Google business profile, and then they want to be able to monetize that. And so I think we'll see this trend continue more and more and more. There's going to be less and less free leads from Google.
Yeah, shocker, right? So anyway, I do want to talk. I want to get into sort of before we wrap it up, get into the future of LSA, but just one more small tactical thing in terms of the setting up of the campaign, specifically when it comes to your geo-targeting, right? I've heard different things like, start broadly or do it, like sort of what's your approach? And I've heard, of course, people say, only like maybe your criminal defense attorney, just focus on the zip codes that are more affluent, can afford your services. But what's your general approach to that?
Well, I don't think like if you're focusing on certain areas and you see that certain geos sign at a much higher rate or convert at a higher rate, particularly for non-contingency work, that's a real consideration. Put that aside. Outside of that, I don't think anyone really has any data to back up that their geo-targeting strategy is the right one. Yeah. We run different geo-targeting strategies for different firms in different markets, and that happens to be the right one for them in that market. So sometimes we'll run a statewide campaign and we'll just run it statewide. Sometimes we'll take a statewide campaign and we'll run it with the counties only, right? It truly depends. I will say a bug that I have seen, and it's somewhat of a persistent bug. It doesn't happen to every account, but it's lingered for a long time, is that sometimes, like if you're targeting counties, you won't appear for a search where someone searches by zip code or vice versa or something like that. So you need to literally just pull out your phone and search using different geo modifiers to see if you're appearing for all the things. Because sometimes you'll appear when you run it for the city, but won't appear when you run it for the county in that city. And so then that can help inform the right geo-targeting strategy for you in terms of whether you're using county or zip or state or how you need to play with that. But there's no rhyme or reason to it. We've had all the different permutations of that that happen where like it's just some trial and error to find out what the right one is for that particular client and or market.
Yeah, because it feels like it can be tricky if you're doing state, you're doing county, you're doing zip, you're doing, literally names of the towns or cities. It's
Yeah.
just like, what do you do them all in some fashion? So
I'll
sounds
generally
like,
start with like the broadest we can and then see how it's performing and then get more narrow in focus from there. So if someone tells me they're willing to run a statewide campaign, I'll just run it statewide and then just see how it's ranking, and then adjust from there. But that's kind of like the base I'll do, which I think some people think is like too simple and they want to think there's additional ways they can add value, but like sometimes simple is fine and generally that works pretty well.
yeah, because I think I heard someone once saying the broader your advertising, like the better it is. Like do it by county as opposed to just doing every zip in the county. But kind of like to your point, you got to look and make sure you're actually surfacing. Maybe there's some sort of bug there. But all right, before we get into the future, one last question. What if you're not getting, you're running a campaign, you're spending you've racked up your budget, you've done all the things in setting the account up, but you're simply not getting any leads? What do you do about that? Is there anything to do about that?
Yeah, I mean, you got to get some sort of volume into the system. And so there's a couple ways you can tackle it. But yeah, the trick is getting some sort of volume into the system to give the system some sort of data to process, right? And so Google will have ways where they like do this for you. Like if you've ever noticed, sometimes maybe there's a competitor like that's ranking on top of you that you've never seen on LSAs before, and they're there for like half a day and then they drop off again, right? Like Google will insert some tests themselves into the system to give people these opportunities. And then when your opportunity rises, you got to really capitalize on it, right? And do all the things you need to do and take advantage of it. But yeah, that can be a tricky part to it in terms of getting that volume into the system.
Yeah, cool. Because I know lots of people have that exact problem. So, all right, let's go back to future of LSA. Like, where do you? Because I feel like when I originally spoke to you, this was for different reasons, but was the question that was very much at the top of my mind is, where do you see LSA going in the next, I don't know, few years as an ad product specifically for Google, and then in the light of Google search dominance is waning to a degree with AI and competition like platforms like ChatGPT. What do you see happening there? Not that any of us know.
Yeah, exactly. My crystal ball. Well, I think no one knows, so don't trust anyone as the gospel here for sure. But I think my take on LSAs is kind of like we talked about at the top. It is Google's response to these things. And so because it prioritizes searcher experience over profit, right? That's the first thing that they're leaning on to signal ad rank. And so, or to influence ad rank. And so to me, LSAs is their response to those threats. And so I continue to think that they will keep doubling down on LSAs and pushing it as their primary product for local service businesses. And I think we're seeing this continue to play out by the virtue of it still being the number one spot on Google. They're inserting it into the local section now and the map listings. They are getting rid of the badges and things like that to make it look even more native so they can still charge you for it. And it's the only product they have that takes all this first-party data that they can't get anywhere else from the calls and from the feedback from the users in terms of reviews and things like that and the lead survey. Like it just is the only thing that they have that allows them to gather all this data to help inform how their customers, their users are being taken care of. And so that's always going to be important to Google, and even more so as competition increases. So they might come up with something better than LSAs to do this in the future, but I think for the next 3 to 5 years, LSAs is where they're going to be pushing.
And then in terms of like pricing, right? Because we talked at the beginning, remember the days leads were, $30, you sign a client for $300. Now leads are, $2, $3, $4 plus $100, depending on the practice area, the market. I got to believe that number will still continue to climb because I think some of these local service ads are probably cannibalizing the traditional Google ads, right? Because they're just placing them higher on the results pages.
For sure. Yeah, you're going to see costs continue to increase. I think we have slowed down in the rate at which they're increasing,
Yeah.
right? Like over the last year and a half, we've seen increases, but not like 100, 200%
Yeah.
like we were saying in the first couple of years. So, I mean, Google's going to continue to see how much money they can milk out of people, for sure. So yeah, it'll keep getting more expensive, but I don't think at the exponential growth we had seen in like the first 3 years.
Yeah, cool. All right. Well, before we start wrapping up here, I just want to kind of just to say, like, for any lawyer firm that's listening, running LSAs or maybe thinking about running, I know you mentioned answering the phone quickly. What are some of the other sort of simple things they can do just to make their campaign at least run modestly good?
Yeah, this is kind of a non-answer, but I think like there
I love
aren't
non-answers.
there aren't simple fixes to LSAs. LSAs work well if you're going full steam ahead and doing everything right, or they just don't work very well. Like that's why the firm, like if you're searching your market, it's the same 5 or 6 firms that you see at the top every time, and then everyone
Yeah.
else is sitting below and they're not getting calls. So there is no like one or two like little tweaks that are going to give you success. It's doing like everything that we talked about with particular focus on what happens during the call and how you complete the survey. And those are not like you can just go and do that little thing. Like that's really developing systems and processes and then having someone, whether it's internal or a vendor you partner with, to like actually do that work. Because to go in and do all that, like it takes time and work. And so, but that's where you win the battle. So if LSAs, and I tell people this all the time, Jason, like LSAs aren't the right platform for every lawyer. Like if you're listening to this and you're like, this sounds like too much money and too much time, LSAs probably aren't the product for you. Like you shouldn't run them. Just stop trying. You know what I mean? Like I think that's an okay thing. Like not every product is for everyone. But if you are someone who wants to be aggressive and looking to grow and want to have and see the value in LSAs and are committed to making LSAs part of your marketing mix, then going all in on them is the way to find success. Like kind of being tepid, you'll continue to have mediocre or no results with it.
Yeah, so that's interesting to go all in, and so I guess sort of for someone that hasn't even started an LSA campaign yet, but they're thinking about it. Realistically, what should they be thinking around in terms of how much to spend and
Yeah.
being how long will it take, to really start seeing some good results? Like how much patience should they have before they should determine this is a fit or it's not?
Yeah. I tell everyone by the end of month 4, if you've done everything you need to do right and you're not seeing the results that you're hoping to see in terms of primarily cost of acquisition, then there's probably something else going on that's broken, or your target cost of acquisition just is not one that you're going to be able to achieve with LSAs. So if you go in full Monty for 4 months doing everything that you need to do and you're not seeing the results that you want, you got to change what you're doing, or your results are not in line with reality in terms of things that can be produced from an LSA campaign.
And is there a certain amount of money? And I imagine this obviously is going to vary from practice area to market. And
Yeah, it depends on the market. I primarily run personal injury campaigns. I think if you can't spend 10K a month on an LSA, you're going to have a hard time being successful. Our more successful campaigns are spending a lot more than that. And I don't say that in a self-interested way.
yeah.
We charge a flat fee. So if you spend 10K or 150K, I don't care. I get paid the same thing. But it's just not enough volume to put into the system in terms of data for Google to process to understand. They're going to have someone who's spending a lot more than you in the market, and it's going to give them a lot more certainty about the type of service that they provide and certainty that they're going to pay their invoice and bill, right? Like, so if you can't get to at least a 10K spend in personal injury, and in some markets a considerable amount more, I think you're going to have a tough time competing on LSAs.
Yeah, good to know. Well, thanks, man. This has been super helpful. I feel like I just want to go back and re-listen to sort of all, because I think we talked about a lot of really important details and nuance to these campaigns, because at first glance, LSA seems like, there's not a lot of levers you can pull there,
Yeah.
but the ones you can are really important, right? So anyway, thanks for all this, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure. It was fun. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no doubt. All right, so I'm here with Thomas Glasgow, and we've been talking about how to really maximize the performance of Google local service ads, often a very frustrating channel for a lot of firms. But you can find Thomas at his website. His firm is 1122 Marketing. That's 1122marketing.com. And there you can book a meeting with Thomas, get a free audit. He'll do a screen share with you in real time to sort of diagnose what's going on with your campaign, whether you work with them or not, try to give you some actionable insights and so forth. I'm also going to drop Thomas's calendar link in the show notes, connect with Thomas on LinkedIn. And of course, I'll be including the article that he wrote for the ABA Law Practice Today publication as well. Thomas, anything else you want to add in there?
No, I don't think so. I think you covered it all. It was fun. Thanks for having me, Jason.
Yeah, you got it, man. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. Take care, Thomas.
Thanks, man.
Thanks for listening to the Alpha Lawyer Podcast. I'm your host, Jason Marsh, and I appreciate you joining us today. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with other lawyers who might benefit. You can find more resources and insights on building a thriving law firm at alphalawyer.io or the Alpha Lawyer YouTube channel. Till next time, keep building the firm of your dreams so you can live your best life.